We don't let a black man like him ruin the image of this hospital. The words of Edward Grant, CEO of Grant Memorial Hospital, echoed in the internal meeting room, without a hint of shame, without a single dissenting glance. The senior doctors only nodded, a few smiled, and a nurse lowered her head to take notes. In their world, black people had no name, no place, and absolutely no right to appear in the gleaming glass main hall. At that very moment, at the hospital's rear side entrance, an ambulance screeched to a halt, sounding like the scream of a soul being rejected. The door burst open. A middle-aged black man lay unconscious on the stretcher, blood streaming from his forehead, his gray hoodie soaked with mud and motor oil. No wallet, no ID, no accompanying relatives. Take him through the secondary ER entrance, a doctor instructed quickly. Homeless unit. What about the main emergency room, a young nurse asked. Eyes full of concern. No place for that kind of person. The male voice was cold, sharp as a blade. No insurance, no relatives, no identity. If you can't tell who gets priority, I'll remind you of the policy. It wasn't a policy. It was a prejudice written in culture and enforced by power. The door to the low-tier treatment area swung open. No luxurious chandeliers, no advanced ventilators, no beeping monitors. Only a hallway smelling of bleach mixed with mildew and flickering fluorescent lights as if someone had drained the life from them. The stretcher rolled into room 6, marked temporarily out of service. Inside, there was a rusted iron bed, a crumpled blanket, a broken sink faucet, and a homeless man shivering in the corner. No one explained anything. No one looked Lionel in the eye. No one asked his name. A nurse placed the blood pressure cuff on Lionel's arm as if working with a sandbag. No one cared what the pressure was. No doctor checked his pupils. No lab tests were ordered. Another nurse standing at the door whispered, "I think this one might be serious. Might even be someone important." The white-lead doctor, bearded, arms crossed. "Not your concern. Just follow protocol. Unidentified cases will be handled after verification. We don't waste premium beds on vagrants. But there's too much blood." The nurse hesitated. "And you think their blood is worth dirtying a premium bed?" In the pitch-dark room, Lionel began to wake up. He couldn't clearly remember what had happened. A sharp pain from his left rib blurred everything. His eyes barely opened, just enough to see a ceiling stained with yellow blotches and the smell in the air. Foul. Suffocating. Something that had no place in any medical facility. Once again, he tried to move his lips. Water. For me. Someone. No one responded. Outside the room, there were faint giggles. Black guy, ragged clothes, no wallet. I bet he stole something and got stabbed. Or a junkie, overdosed on the street. Lionel heard every word, even though his mind was spinning. Those words didn't pierce his skin. They cut straight through the last shred of dignity he clung to inside. They didn't know who he was, but even if they did, it wouldn't have mattered to them. What would happen if they found out his real identity upstairs? In a meeting room equipped with an LED screen, Director Edward Grant was reviewing the patient list for the day. Entry number 47 male, black. Approximately 40-45 years old. Unidentified, car accident. No documents. Keep him in the low priority ward, he said without even looking up. A physician in charge of records spoke up. What if the patient's condition worsens? Grant raised an eyebrow. Even better, less public attention. Just mark it as dead at the scene. No response in time. A moment of silence blanketed the room, but no one objected, because this was Grant Memorial, where reputation mattered more than ethics, where skin color determines your chances of survival. Downstairs, Lionel lay shivering. His breathing grew labored. The wound on his rib began to fester. A blood transfusion tube had been inserted incorrectly. The blood wasn't going into his vein, but into soft tissue, causing his arm to swell grotesquely. A nurse noticed. She quietly stepped in and saw his discolored arm. This tube, she moved to fix it, but just as she was about to pull it out, a doctor tapped her shoulder lightly. "Don't touch him. He hasn't been verified. But, orders from above. If you want to keep your job, walk away." The nurse froze, then withdrew her hand. Inside the room, Lionel began convulsing, his head slumped to the side. Saliva foamed from his mouth. His eyes rolled back, his fists clenched in pain. His heartbeat raced erratically, but the room remained silent. No alarm, no call for a doctor. No one came rushing in. Another nurse glanced through the glass window, let out a quiet sigh. If he really were someone important, he wouldn't be here. You need insurance, or someone to call on your behalf. Otherwise, there's nothing more we can do. That sentence sounded like a death sentence, delivered from the lips of a nurse with an expressionless face. She didn't look at Lionel, didn't bend down. She spoke as if she were talking to the wall, or worse, as if Lionel wasn't even human. Then she walked away, leaving him alone in a nameless room, with pain gnawing at every cell in his body. Lionel couldn't remember how long he had been lying there. He only knew that time here wasn't measured by clocks, but by the small convulsions in his chest, by the erratic beats of a heart desperately trying to stay alive. Each time he whispered for help, he was met with chilling silence. He tried to sit up, but failed. His right arm was nearly paralyzed from blood pooling in the soft tissue. A wound on his left shoulder had started bleeding again. Nausea rose, but there was no bucket, no water, no one to help. How many had died here? Nameless, ageless, just because of their place in society. Another young nurse walked in, clipboard in hand. She paused briefly upon seeing Lionel still conscious, his eyes bloodshot from pain yet strangely bright. Something in his gaze made her hesitate. "I want to see a doctor," Lionel whispered, his voice hoarse. "We can't do anything unless you can provide identification. Health insurance or an ID? Anything. Lost. In the accident. Then, you'll have to wait." She swallowed hard, then stepped back toward the door. But before turning away, she said quietly, almost like a confession, "We're only allowed to care for verified patients. I'm sorry." Lionel turned his face to the wall, not to hide but to conceal the shame. No word could describe this feeling when a human being is treated as invisible just because of a missing piece of plastic with his name on it. On the second floor, in the staff cafeteria, a group of medical interns were having lunch. A curly-haired, dark-skinned girl named Naomi was filling her water cup while rewatching research clips from last year's conference. The screen showed a man presenting on the breakthrough of mRNA vaccines. Naomi frowned. That face looked familiar. She zoomed in on the video, then quickly flipped open the patient file. John Doe, male, 45 years old, unidentified, bicycle accident, low-tier treatment ward. She jumped up, spilling her water on the table. No way. Naomi ran straight to the office of the emergency shift supervisor, Dr. Madeline York, a stern middle-aged woman with a long record of clinical achievements. Naomi placed her phone on the desk, pointing to the video. "Doctor, I think there's something serious. Patient number 47 might be Lionel Delroy, CEO of Delroy Biotech. He's lying in the low-tier ward." Madeline looked up, stayed silent for a few seconds, then slowly pushed the phone back toward Naomi. "Do you know what you're saying? And where are you right now?" "Yes, I do. But if that really is him, we have to..." "Keep your mouth shut." Her voice was hard as stone. "If you want to continue your internship here, from this moment on, you know nothing." Naomi froze. "But if he dies, then he dies like every other unverified patient. No one will care, and no one will blame you." Naomi stepped out, heart in turmoil. The door closed behind her, cold as the sound of a soul being locked away. At that very moment, Lionel was trembling in his bed. His fever spiked into delirium. Sweat poured like rain, his hand clutching the side of the bed to endure the fire-like pain from chest to abdomen. His lips murmured a name, Simone. A nurse passed by, glanced in, then turned away. No note, no entry. Outside in the corridor, two doctors were chatting about the morning's heart surgery. Their voices weren't quiet. "Grant's furious because a reporter wanted to do an interview. Well, it's about the vaccine deal last year. He still holds a grudge against Delroy for refusing to license it. What, Lionel Delroy? Yeah. Keep it down. 2 years ago. Grant failed to strike a deal with Delroy, lost his reputation and a fortune. That's when he switched to investing in healthcare systems." Lionel opened his eyes. His mind was spinning, but he understood every word. Edward Grant! He forced himself upright, whispering, "Grant? He's here." His eyes widened as memories came flooding back. That meeting, the long table, on one side, Lionel Delroy, with research in hand and pride in his heart. On the other side, Edward Grant. with a cold smile and a voice that reeked of money and power. "Sell me the patent. Lionel, you'll go down in history and become 10 times richer." Lionel refused, for ethics, for patience, for the oath of medicine. And now, that man was here, running this place. And he was a dying body on the gurney inside his old rival's hospital. If he knew Lionel was here, he'd let him die. Or worse, he'd make sure of it. Lionel's hand fumbled beneath the pillow. Still no phone, no signal. His body seized up. Temperature dropped suddenly. A reaction from the incorrect blood transfusion had begun. Lionel's eyes grew dim, but his heart kept beating. And within it, a fire burned bright. Not to survive, but to live. To destroy the man who built this place. The name Edward Grant kept echoing in Lionel's mind like a pathological bell, ringing through his crumbling memory, dragging back each fragment like a blade flaying flesh. 2 years ago, in the mahogany-paneled boardroom of Delroy Biotech headquarters, Edward Grant had sat with his legs crossed, hand resting casually on a leather briefcase. His smile was full of power, but his eyes were as cold as a death sentence. On the table was the draft contract he had personally brought, exclusive distribution rights to a new generation mRNA vaccine, with a clause that prioritized premium markets at 15 times the production cost. At that time, Lionel had looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Without hesitation, I didn't create this vaccine to profit from dying people." Grant didn't get angry. He simply smiled, nodded, and withdrew the contract. "You'll regret this," were his final words as he walked out of the room, and Lionel didn't regret it. But now, lying here in the filthiest corner of the very hospital run by Grant, he understood enemies never forget. Grant hadn't let go. He had merely changed weapons from pharmaceuticals to hospitals, from selling life to deciding who deserved to live. Lionel forced a deep breath. The pain in his chest felt like needles stabbing his lungs with every inhale, but he had to stay alert. He couldn't die here, not while Grant ran this entire system and might be trying to kill him without lifting a finger. He glanced around the room. It was still cold. The dim yellow light made everything appear to be rotting in slow motion. No camera, no doctor, no second vitals check. Only one nurse passed by. "You," Lionel called, voice hoarse. She paused, hesitant. "Can you check inside my coat pocket? In the lining? There's a key card." "For what?" She looked at him, doubtful. "I am Lionel Delroy." A moment of silence. The nurse raised an eyebrow, then burst into laughter, not from amusement, but that cruel, mocking kind. "You think CEOs wear torn hoodies and sweatpants? I used to dream I was Beyoncé." But then I woke up still a low-tier nurse. She shook her head, scoffed, and walked away. No one believed him, even when he told the truth. In this place, truth was a luxury they had long learned to ignore. Lionel said no more. He closed his eyes not to sleep, but to remember. He remembered that night, after refusing Grant's offer. When he received an anonymous call, there are people you don't say no to, especially when they control the hospital you'll end up in next. He once thought it was a joke. Now, it felt like a prophecy being fulfilled, line by line, word by word. The pain in his lower abdomen made him grimace. The IV bag was nearly empty. No one came to replace it. Blood still oozed from his shoulder. Each heartbeat felt like a blade stabbing back at him, but he no longer had time for pain. He needed evidence. He didn't need them to believe him. He just had to live long enough to expose everything. Lionel curled up, his breathing ragged, but his ears were still sharp enough to catch the sound of high heels clacking rapidly down the hallway. Not a nurse's footsteps. That sound was familiar, sharp, steady, and determined. The door burst open. A white woman in her 30s, wearing a rain-soaked trench coat and a slightly wrinkled business suit from running, stormed in like charging into a battlefield. Sarah Holt, senior legal associate, Lionel's most trusted aide for the past 7 years. "Step aside," she barked straight into the nurse's face. "Who are you? This is a non-identified patient ward. I'm the guardian of this patient." She pulled from her blazer a Delroy Biotech ID badge, bearing Lionel's photo, along with a complete medical dossier sealed and verified by 3 international medical institutions. "Lionel Delroy, CEO. Take me to the attending physician right now, or I'll have the Department of Health, the FBI, and every CNN reporter standing in your hospital lobby in the next 5 minutes." No one dared respond. A doctor opened his mouth, but his internal phone rang. A panicked voice from upstairs screamed through the line, "Cease all procedures immediately. The woman is telling the truth. Urgent verification just hit the central system. Patient number 47 is Lionel Delroy." God. Sarah moved straight to Lionel's bedside. His face was pale, sweat soaking his forehead. His eyes half closed, but when he saw her, a faint flicker of light sparked in them. "Sarah," he whispered, lips cracked. "Finally." "I'm here now. You're safe," she said softly, gently squeezing his hand. "They have no idea what they have done, but they will." A moment of silence, not of peace, but of reckoning. Everyone in the room knew the game was over, and a far greater war was about to begin. Sarah turned, staring straight at the lead doctor, her voice ice-cold. "Call Director Grant. Now!" The final scene lingered on Lionel's face. His breath still labored, but his eyes no longer hopeless. "I don't need them to believe me," he whispered, his lips curling into a warning. "I just need to live long enough to bring this into the light." The moment Lionel Delroy's name appeared on the Federal Health System's biometric verification board, the atmosphere at Grant Memorial Hospital practically froze. Upstairs, the internal phones of shift supervisors rang non-stop. The media began to stir. An urgent memo from the Department of Health was issued, demanding an internal investigation into the intake process for patient number 47. An alpha-level figure, someone who had once sat at the same table as the Secretary of Defense, someone who helped save the world during a pandemic, had been treated like garbage in the very hospital whose contract he once refused to sign. And now, he is still alive. Down in the lower ward, Lionel was being wheeled out of the filthy room where, less than an hour ago, he had lain trembling, sweating in silence and blood. Sarah walked beside him, one hand holding her phone, the other gripping Lionel's arm tightly as if holding on to the dignity that had just been restored. "He needs immediate transfer to the ICU. Start broad-spectrum antibiotics. Retype and administer the correct blood group." Her voice left no room for negotiation. "Yes, but the incorrect transfusion may cause complications." "Don't talk to me about may. Don't forget, this is the man who designed the portable dialysis system you people are using." Sarah leaned down, whispering into Lionel's ear, "You're burning up, but don't worry, the media won't stay silent, and Grant won't sleep tonight." Lionel managed a tired smile, the kind of smile worn by someone with nothing left to lose, but every reason to return. Hours later, Lionel was transferred to the VIP floor where he should have been from the start, but this time, not to rest. He needed time not to recover, but to prepare a counterstrike, as the painkillers began to work and his vitals stabilized. Sarah opened her personal laptop and placed it in front of him. "We've got a lot to do," she said. "Evidence?" he asked, still weak, but sharp. "Yes." She nodded. The first on-duty nurse leaked an audio recording from the staff meeting. "And Naomi, the med student, agreed to testify. She was told by Dr. York to stay silent or lose her career. And more." Sarah slid a small USB drive toward him. "The hospital has an internal camera system." Lionel's eyes widened. The footage played he lay unconscious, bleeding. Unattended, a nurse walked in, looked, and walked out. A doctor said, "Just let him lie there. Someone like that in the main room would ruin the hospital's image." Laughter. Then the door closed. "We didn't just record the truth. We captured how the world discards people because of their skin color." "You know what's funny?" Sarah asked, smirking. Lionel looked at her and nodded faintly. "The contract Grant sent you 2 years ago. Do you still have it on my personal server?" He replied, "I retrieved it from the cloud. There's an audio recording attached. Grant once said, if you don't sign, one day you'll end up on my table. Not to negotiate, but to beg for your life." Lionel smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was sharp like a blade honed over 2 years. Now it's his turn to beg. Outside the room, rushed footsteps echoed. An administrative staffer knocked and stepped in nervously. "Mr. Delroy, Mr. Grant requests to see you." Sarah looked up, eyes flashing. "Tell him to wait." Lionel took a deep breath. He turned toward the window. The city lights still shone. But for him, that light now took on a new shape, awakening and revenge. He looked Sarah in the eyes, voice cracked but resolute. "Call the press. Call the Department of Health. Call everyone who ever thought they could walk into a hospital without being abandoned because of the color of their skin. and tell them, he paused, inhaled deeply, from this day forward, no one has the right to decide who gets to live just because they don't look like the standard you made up. 3 hours later, Grant Memorial Hospital remained eerily quiet, not from peace, but from fear. Everyone who had ever heard the name Lionel Delroy was now pulling out their phones, checking patient records, shift logs, surveillance footage, even revisiting casual conversations they'd let slip in the hallways. News that Lionel was still alive and verified spread faster than any virus. In the VIP room on the 10th floor, soft white lights glowed overhead. Sarah was on a video call with 3 national-level media advisors. Lionel, though his pulse was still weak, had clearer eyes than ever, watching every slide attentively. Naomi, the young intern who had dared to speak up, sat silently beside him, holding a stack of documents, firm and unwavering. Our first goal is to control the narrative, but not to silence it to set the timing for an explosion, Sarah said, eyes fixed on the screen. We need to show the world this wasn't an accident. It was a system. Lionel nodded slightly. His left hand had regained movement. I need a list of patients mistreated in the low-tier ward over the past 5 years. We're retrieving it, but access will be limited without an official investigation order. Then we'll create one. Outside the hospital room, a group of people in gray suits waited. Leading them was a silver-haired man with sharp features, Paul Graham, head of the hospital's legal department. Mr. Grant would like to speak with him, Paul said with a polite but cold tone. Mr. Grant has no right to request anything, Sarah replied. And if you want access to Lionel, submit your request through legal channels. Paul nodded. We'll do that. But if possible, Mr. Grant would like to offer a personal apology. Sarah said nothing. She closed the door. Inside, Lionel asked softly. Who's outside? Sarah looked at him for a moment, then answered. Someone who once thought he could decide how you'd die. Lionel closed his eyes, as if analyzing a chessboard. Don't open the door. Don't receive him. Not now. Lionel turned to Naomi, the young medical intern, the first to sound the alarm despite being threatened with losing her position. She sat quietly at the edge of the bed, clutching a marked-up folder, her eyes steady though clearly still unsure of the storm she had stepped into. Do you still have that printout of the internal chat from the other day? Naomi pulled from her coat a highlighted copy if it's a black person without ID. Send them to the low-tier ward. Don't let the media catch wind. Lionel took the page, fingers gliding over each line. This is the first bullet, he said, but we need the gun. Sarah suddenly stood up. Wait, something's not right. She opened her laptop, logging into a media monitoring platform. Why is there still no coverage of Lionel Delroy's hospitalization? Not a single headline. Not one article. The room fell silent. Naomi looked confused. I thought, when he got verified, the alert system was triggered. It was, Sarah replied. It's a national internal alert network. At least one news outlet should have picked it up. Lionel frowned. They're suppressing the news. Sarah nodded. Grant may have bribed or pressured major media channels to stay quiet. For now. She quickly called one of her trusted investigative journalists. Julian. It's Sarah Holt. You know Lionel Delroy, right? What? There's a rumor he died in an accident a few hours ago. He's alive, and he's at Grant Memorial. There was a pause on the line. Then Jesus. I just got an email from my boss telling us not to touch any files related to Delroy Biotech. They've blocked everything. Sarah turned to Lionel. Grant's doing everything he can to bury this, but that only proves he's afraid. Lionel took a deep breath. Then we won't take this to the press. What do you want to do? He looked straight ahead, his eyes calm as stone. We'll take this story to live broadcast. No editing. No producers. Only the truth and me. Sarah looked at Lionel as if she had just heard a silent death sentence handed down to the very system they were about to confront. She didn't ask again. She understood perfectly when Lionel spoke. It meant every escape route had already been burned. I'll arrange it, she said. Independent broadcast network. Private satellite. We'll stream simultaneously on 3 international platforms. No one can silence this voice. Lionel leaned back against the pillow. Good. And send invitations to the people Grant stepped on. The ones denied emergency care. The families who never got to see their loved ones one last time. Naomi, still seated at the edge of the bed, slowly lifted her head. Her eyes suddenly lit up. I know someone, she said, voice trembling. A black woman. My friend's mother, she died last year in this very hospital. They said she came too late, but we know. They let her wait for 2 hours without doing anything." Sarah took notes instantly. "Find her. Invite her to the broadcast. Not just one," Lionel added. "We'll launch a campaign, #LifelineDenied, so those who've been silenced for years finally have a place to speak." That very night, a group of human rights attorneys were assembled. Sarah worked with 3 IT experts to set up a private transmission line. Disconnected from any controlled media infrastructure, Naomi began calling every friend, every victim's family, every former colleague who had witnessed injustice at the hospital but never dared speak up. The silence Grant had fought so hard to preserve began to crack. On a private channel, Paul Graham, head of the hospital's legal department, called Lionel's room directly, this time with a different tone. "Mr. Delroy." He cleared his throat. "You may be misunderstanding several things. We are prepared to issue a public apology and a compensation package." Sarah cut in. "There's no one left who can apologize." Paul paused for a few seconds. "If this goes public, it won't just harm the hospital. It could damage the entire regional healthcare system. That's the goal," Lionel replied, voice soft but resolute. Sarah received a message from the ethical hacker group assisting them. The hospital's internal system has a locked archive. Over 200 death records encrypted as unidentified cases. Nearly 80% are people of color. Lionel stared at the screen. "Unlock it, as fast as possible. If that data reaches the public, this won't just be a case of discrimination. It'll be an organized crime." That night, Lionel, still lying in his hospital bed, appeared on camera for the first time since the accident. He wore a simple white shirt, no tie, no stage lighting, just his eyes, staring directly into the lens, as if looking each person in the eye. "Hello, I'm Lionel Delroy, and I am patient number 47. He began to speak. No script, no direction, just the truth every minute he was treated as invisible. Every second a nurse stood watching him convulse without helping. Every cold glance that denied his right to live simply because he didn't have a wallet or the right skin tone. There's a place in this hospital where no one asks your name. They look at your skin, and your clothes, and if you don't fit the standard, you don't get saved. They call it the low-tier ward. I call it the place where the system kills without a gun." That sentence became the headline of hundreds of news articles within 2 hours of the live stream ending. But Lionel hadn't told it all. What he'd just said was only the tip of the iceberg, and beneath it was the name everyone was about to hear, Edward Grant. The broadcast ended. The screen went dark, but Lionel's words kept echoing in the minds of millions. No one was prepared for the media earthquake that erupted minutes later. The #LifelineDenied shot to the top of national trends within 27 minutes. On medical forums, nurses, interns, and admin staff who had once worked in private hospitals began flooding threads with stories they had long been forced to keep quiet. "We were instructed not to admit black patients without insurance unless they were already dying in front of us. The low-tier ward isn't temporary. It's where people are sent to die slowly." Then came the tidal wave, sparked by a leaked video. On screen appeared a familiar room, the internal meeting room at Grant Memorial, recorded not long ago. Standing in the center, none other than Edward Grant. His voice rang out, cold and unapologetically cruel. "I didn't build this hospital to be a community center for undocumented black people. What's the point of saving them? They don't pay, they don't contribute, and if they survive, they just become another burden. Dialysis for them so they can live 10 more useless years." The meeting room was silent. No one objected. Some nodded, some chuckled softly. As soon as the video was made public on Lionel's broadcast platform, everything exploded. Sarah, directing the campaign from the Media Control Center, simply said one line, "That's the slip Grant made." And now, he can't take it back. Edward Grant's illustrious 30-year medical career, the empire he built, went up in flames in just 37 seconds of footage. Inside Grant's office, 10 minutes after the video went viral, he slammed his hand on the desk and shouted into the phone, "Take it all down, delete it now." But no one responded. His assistants had vanished or were busy, handing in their resignations. The media swarmed Grant Memorial. The National Medical Oversight Authority declared an emergency investigation into patient sorting procedures with signs of racial discrimination and severe ethical violations. Lionel was still lying in his hospital bed, holding the remote, watching the live news ticker roll by minute after minute. He didn't wear a victorious smile. Only his eyes grew heavier, deeper, as if seeing the shadows of hundreds behind him, people who never got the chance to speak. Naomi, sitting beside him with a tense expression, whispered, "They're calling for Grant to resign. Some are even petitioning to revoke his medical license permanently." "Not enough," Lionel replied slowly. "Then what's missing?" Lionel tightened his grip on the remote. Proof that this wasn't an angry outburst. It was policy. A policy of murder wrapped in legal language. And as if fate had been waiting for Lionel to finish that sentence. Sarah walked in her face expressionless, holding up a USB stick. "You need to see this." Lionel looked at her and gestured to play it. The screen lit up with an internal spreadsheet, marked with the hospital board's approval seal. File name automatic tier transfer list, non-VIP, eligible patient classification, first column race, second column insurance status, third column emergency priority ratio, AI automation coefficient, and in a small note at the bottom of the file, one chilling sentence appeared: "If AI identifies patient as black, uninsured, and unaccompanied, transfer to Tier C via silent protocol." Sarah looked at Lionel. Her voice caught in her throat. This is what they called process optimization, but in truth, it's legalizing abandonment. The next morning, the media erupted. From CNN and BBC to independent livestream channels, people were talking about only one name: Lionel Delroy, once hailed as the hero of the pharmaceutical industry, now known as the whistleblower of healthcare. But alongside his name, another was burning just as brightly in the opposite way: Edward Grant. In just 24 hours, Grant had gone from one of the most powerful figures in private healthcare to the living symbol of discrimination, systemic greed, and legalized inhumanity. And just as Lionel had predicted, the media was only the tip of the iceberg. The real shockwave came when internal files from Grant Memorial Hospital were leaked en masse: nearly 2,500 undocumented deaths, 78% of them black or undocumented immigrants, 16 internal audio clips of Grant speaking with blatant prejudice: "Black people are black holes in the healthcare budget," an AI triage system designed to favor white, high-premium patients by default. But the biggest twist didn't come from data, it came from a person. That afternoon, just as Lionel had finished his medication and was resting, Sarah entered the room, her face like steel. "You need to prepare," she said, placing a printed sheet on the table. "Someone who used to be Grant's ally just reached out, and you're going to want to hear this." Lionel skimmed the page. At the top of the printed email, "I don't want to go down with him. Signed, Dr. Eric Mahoney, Internal Policy Advisor at Grant Memorial." Sarah opened her laptop and played the audio clip attached. A man's voice came through, urgent, but clear. "I was the one tasked with building the racially biased tiering system. Grant ordered it. He signed off on it. There are documents, signatures, and executive codes." Naomi, now Sarah's tech assistant, turned from her workstation. "Mahoney's ready to testify. And he has the original documents. Not copies, not scans. So, handwritten by Grant himself, with this line." Marciano, she zoomed in on the screen. A scanned policy contract dated 18 months ago. At the bottom corner, bold ink in Grant's handwriting: "Healthcare costs should not be wasted on demographics that cannot regenerate economic value, e.g. Edward Grant." The room went still. Lionel leaned back in his chair, face stunned like a warrior realizing he'd been standing at the gates of an inferno for 2 years without knowing it. Sarah broke the silence. "You know what this means, right?" Lionel looked at her and nodded. "It means we're not just indicting a hospital, we're about to prosecute an entire system." Just then, Sarah's phone vibrated. She looked at the screen, then handed it to Lionel. "It's the Department of Justice." Lionel took the call, holding the phone to his ear. "I'm listening," a deep, steady voice replied. "Mr. Delroy, based on the evidence you and your legal team have provided in the past 24 hours, we are officially notifying you that an arrest warrant for Edward Grant will be issued tomorrow morning for the following charges: systemic discrimination, medical record tampering, obstruction of investigation, and severe ethical violations of medical conduct." Lionel didn't speak. He simply clenched his fist, and for the first time since the accident, His eyes welled up. Naomi whispered, "Did we actually do it?" Sarah answered for him. "We're only just getting started." And as if fate knew the perfect moment to drop the curtain, breaking news exploded across every major outlet simultaneously. Edward Grant indicted. Emergency court summons issued. Live hearing broadcast scheduled for tomorrow morning. Would the man who once ran the largest healthcare network on the East Coast bow his head? Or would he drag others down with him? Lionel closed his eyes, whispering without sound. He'll face the one thing he never thought would come for him, justice. 7:00 a.m. Eastern District Federal Court, New York City. A fleet of black vehicles pulled up to the gate, amid a storm of shouting reporters, a wall of police officers, and live cameras streaming to every screen across the U.S. One man stepped out of the second car, Edward Grant, charcoal gray suit, purple tie, head still held high, but if you looked closely, his hand trembled not from cold, but from the knowledge that this time no power could shield him. In his hand was a thick envelope, a voluntary cooperation agreement with the court, but what he didn't know was the court already had everything. What he was about to offer was merely confirmation of the sentence to come. Inside the courtroom, Lionel sat in the front row, granted special attendance as honorary witness and honorary plaintiff. Sarah sat beside him, eyes fixed on the sign language interpreter broadcasting to hospital monitors across the nation. Naomi, now seated farther away in the press section, held her phone steady. Live streaming for thousands watching via the hashtag Lifeline Denied platform, Grant entered the courtroom, and for the first time in his 30-year career, no one stood, no one greeted him, no smiles, only a silence as cold as stone, the kind he used to reserve for dying poor patients. Grant's lawyer stood to speak. A series of familiar words rang out system misinterpretation. Individual oversight. Incomplete protocol. No proof of intent. But then, a soft click echoed through the room. Sarah opened her laptop, connected to the projector. On the screen appeared a newly decrypted document policy proposal for treatment tier reduction, signed by Edward Grant. At the bottom, a chilling note: Tier C will serve as a temporary holding space for patients with low societal contribution potential. Criteria: Black, homeless, uninsured, no clear employment, no legal guardian. The room froze. The judge nodded to the prosecutor. We request to introduce an unexpected witness. The back doors opened. Dr. Eric Mahoney entered, pale, disheveled, holding a thick folder. He walked straight to the stand, hand shaking as he raised it to swear in. I was asked to design a discriminatory system, and I did. I programmed the AI to sort patients based on suggestions from above. I reported directly to Edward Grant. The courtroom gasped. Grant shot up, shouting, "You're lying, you have no right." But Mahoney bowed his head. I should have spoken up 2 years ago, but I was afraid, and now I don't want to be afraid anymore. Naomi suddenly received a message on her phone. A former software engineer at Grant Memorial had just sent her a line of original code from the auto-sorting program for high-risk patients in the low-tier ward. Sarah immediately stood. "Your Honor, we have just received encrypted data confirming..." Not only did the system sort patients, it also predicted mortality risk and automatically prioritized white patients if medical resources were limited. For the first time, Grant collapsed into his chair, hands clutching his head. No more shouting. The judge needed no more. Based on incontrovertible evidence, this court orders the immediate arrest of the defendant, Edward Grant, on charges of systemic discrimination resulting in loss of life, abuse of healthcare infrastructure, medical record tampering, and the last severe violations of medical ethics. Handcuffs clicked shut on Grant's wrists. Right there in the courtroom, camera shutters exploded, but Lionel simply watched. No smile. Naomi whispered, "He's really fallen." Sarah nodded gently. Not just him, an entire system has just been exposed. As Grant was led away, he turned to Lionel, eyes bloodshot, pride gone. "You think you've won? You have no idea how many others are still running this system. I'm just the surface." Lionel replied with just one line, "And I'm the one who's going to rip out the roots." 1 week after the trial, Grant Memorial Hospital, the once glass-covered symbol of American private healthcare excellence, now lay under tarps. The front gate cordoned off by investigators, and the logo atop the building removed in silence. On social media, one image went viral: the old Grant Memorial sign, torn down, lying crooked on the ground. Next to it, a new sign, Lifeline Equity Center. The new name, chosen by Lionel Delroy. And it was more than a name. From his own case, Lionel launched the Lifeline Equity Initiative, a national network combining legal aid, medical support, independent investigations, and public education on discrimination within the healthcare system. It was a fusion of justice, technology, and trust. Naomi, after completing her internship, declined offers from 3 prestigious hospitals. Instead, she became Director of Next Gen Medical Ethics Coordination at Lifeline Equity. She stood by Lionel at every speech, every summit, and most importantly, she was the constant reminder that the smallest voices can create the loudest change. Sarah Holt, once just a legal assistant, now led the Policy Reform Division, spearheading efforts to rewrite federal tiered care legislation, dismantling the legal loopholes that once protected people like Edward Grant. At a congressional hearing, Lionel presented a groundbreaking report titled Legal Death: How a System Can Kill Through Silence. It wasn't a dry presentation. It was a blade, forged from data and blood, that dissected, in full detail, the healthcare stratification mechanism, every administrative decision that had pushed people because of their skin color or income to the edge of death. In under an hour, he presented 47 untreated death cases, including 12 patients who could have lived if treated in time, an AI that misclassified 83% of Black patients, redirecting them to lower-tier care, and a post-scandal survey of nearly 10,000 individuals, showing that over 60% of Black patients had experienced delayed admission in private hospitals. But Lionel didn't stop at numbers. He displayed photos of a mother who lost her child, a wife sitting alone outside the ER, Black men who never woke up again. He read their names, one by one. We cannot forget them. Because they didn't die from illness, they died because we refused to see them as human. 1 minute after his speech ended, the entire chamber, Democrats and Republicans alike, rose in unison, not with applause, but with the clap of awakening. Lionel bowed his head, then raised it, and delivered a final sentence that carved itself into history. I did not come here to reclaim my own dignity. I came to reclaim the right to live without having to prove we deserve it. Hours later, his report became the first citizen healthcare document ever archived under a personal name at the Library of Congress, marking the beginning of sweeping reform across the national healthcare system. That evening, inside the new Lifeline Equity office, Lionel sat alone, looking out the glass window. Below, a group of Black children played in front of the center's entrance, a place where, once, no Black person was allowed to wait more than 15 minutes without being asked to leave. Naomi entered, holding a new report. The expansion project in Texas just got approved. Lionel nodded slightly. And? You still haven't agreed to a single interview from the major press, she teased. No need, Lionel replied. I've already said everything not in headlines, but in action. A soft, warm voiceover could be heard. The villain has been brought into the light. But true light is when we never let darkness return to what it was. Naomi paused at the door. You know, the day I saw you lying in that low-tier room, I thought this world is over. But now... Lionel turned to her. And now... She smiled, eyes shimmering. Now I think... Maybe justice isn't late. It just needed someone strong enough to open the door. Breaking news broadcast, the Delroy Act banning healthcare stratification based on race, income, or insurance status has just been passed with the highest vote margin in the last 20 years. Edward Grant is now facing a 35-year prison sentence, along with 11 civil lawsuits filed by victims' families. Lionel stood by the window. A child ran past, paused, looked up at him through the glass, then waved. He didn't wave back. He simply smiled softly, just enough to know a door had been opened. And this time, no one would be left behind.